Hello and welcome back to the football discussion. This is your host, Colby Cummings. Today we're going to have our third and final segment of playing football on spreadsheets. Today's episode we're going to talk about how you should be measuring quarterback play and the establish the run debate that's currently going on in the NFL. The advanced analytics have a lot to say about measuring quarterback play, and they argued that a lot of the metrics that we have been using are outdated, and I have to agree with them. Using the box score stats like completion percentage, yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and passer rating, while those aren't terrible, they're definitely outdated. We have more advanced metrics and we should really be making better use of them. The problem with a lot of these stats is that they are just that. They are just raw stats. They're just numbers. People can just fill up the spreadsheet and they can manipulate their stats that make them look like they're performing better than they actually are. The advanced metrics add a little bit of context and they help us understand if a quarterback's really playing well. There's so much more that goes into quarterback play than just filling up the stat sheet. Adding context gives a great way to really measure quarterback play and determine if what your quarterback is doing is enough, if it's going to help you win games, and if they are the problem or if they are not the problem. In a previous episode, I already talked about why passer rating is really outdated because it's influenced by some numbers that really aren't great indicators of quarterback play. So we'll just start off by saying passer rating, it's outdated. We shouldn't be using it. If you're still using it, you're behind the times. So what should we be using instead? Some stats that I really like that help add some context. On a basic level, yards per attempt, that's going to show you if a quarterback's actually driving the ball downfield. Because in order to win, you do have to drive the ball downfield. You're going to need to get your team into field goal range, score touchdowns, score points. That's how you win games. Pretty simple, right? Looking a little bit further in depth, a stat that I've started to like a little bit more as opposed to passer rating would be QBR. It's a little bit better than passer rating because some of the things it does well is it takes into context if a quarterback is fumbling, their rushing yards. It puts less emphasis on stats like completion percentage, which are easily manipulated. These numbers aren't heavily influenced by a quarterback that's just stat stuffing. But again, no single measure is really enough to tell if a quarterback's playing well. It's more of a composite score. It takes more than one variable to determine if a quarterback's playing well. On a more advanced level, one of the stats I've really fallen in love with is EPA, per play, expected points added. That's something I talked about in my last podcast, so just a quick recap of what that is. It takes the number of points that are expected to be scored on any given play. So say you're on your own 20-yard line, you're not expected to score. Say you're on your opponent's 1-yard line, you are expected to score. And it measures the difference from one play to the very next play to determine how much value a play added, an individual play added to a team, and their likelihood to score. So basically a higher number is going to be better. A quarterback that has a high EPA per play, that means they're driving the ball downfield, they're helping add value and create points for their team, which is obviously going to help them win games. And at the end of the day, that is the goal of the quarterback, is to put points on the board for the offense, move the ball, and also win games. So I previously mentioned how I don't really like completion percentage because things like taking a bunch of checkdowns that really don't enhance your chances of winning, that gets completion percentage really high, and that's not something that I really like. One thing I like to measure a quarterback's accuracy better would be completion percentage above expected. What this really does is it just adds context. If you're throwing to a wide receiver 2 yards downfield versus 20 yards downfield, how close the nearest defender is, where you're at on the field, down in distance, and it measures how efficient a quarterback and how accurate they are when delivering the ball. Next Gen Stats has done a really good job using microchip technology to use player tracking to determine how far away a receiver is from a quarterback and how close the nearest defender is. And this also helps us understand how big of a window a quarterback is trying to fit a ball into to complete the pass. This is a better measure of if a quarterback is able to deliver a ball accurately, and obviously hitting a wide receiver that's open by 10 yards versus half a yard, and depending how far they are downfield, that makes a big difference. So an accurate quarterback is going to be able to fit the ball into tight windows. They're going to be able to drive the ball downfield and put it where they need it to be. Another stat I like is the air distance of a throw. Obviously, again, checking the ball down to a wide receiver that's at or near the line of scrimmage, that doesn't really make you an accurate quarterback. Being able to deliver the ball, even if it's not 70 yards downfield, even if it's just an intermediate throw from 10 to 20 yards or a 30-yard post route, if a quarterback's able to hit those throws consistently and be accurate on them, despite pressure in their face and also defenders being near their receivers, they're still delivering it accurately. That's something a good quarterback, has to be able to do, and that's a good way to measure if a quarterback's doing their job. So a lot of these basic level stats that we're accustomed to, like completion percentage, they're really outdated, especially teams are taking more college concepts. They're throwing more screens. They're checking the ball down. They're taking easy yards. They're using a lot of other things to help the offense run efficiently. So a quarterback who has a really high completion percentage, they might be an accurate quarterback. They might not be. Just completion percentage alone is not the way to measure it. Completion percentage above expected is a lot better of a metric because, like I said, it adds context. Another thing that was mentioned in part 1 of playing football on spreadsheets is that sacks are definitely a quarterback stat. They influence this so heavily. You have to incorporate that into quarterback play to see if they are effective. If they're taking a lot of sacks, it's not always the offensive line's fault. Sometimes it is, but we're learning more and more through the use of analytics that sacks really are a quarterback stat, and you need to measure their performance, including the sacks that they take. So please, for the love of God, stop judging quarterbacks off of raw stats and the box score. It's so ineffective. You could not be more wrong if you think a quarterback who completes 70% of his passes is an accurate quarterback. There are so many factors that go into it, and these advanced metrics help add context and really give you a better understanding of the quarterback you're watching and if they actually are efficient, if they're effective, and if they're helping their team. So we'll go ahead and switch gears. Today we're going to talk about the establish the run debate and whether running backs are really that valuable and if they're worth paying. The analytics community will try and sell you this idea that running is inefficient and that passing is much more efficient. Yes, they do have numbers to back this up. It is very true. It is very real. And I think it is something that the NFL needs to start embracing. Ultimately, the value of an all-pro running back versus a guy that you just drafted in the 4th round and is starting is really not that much of a difference. You know, any running back usually can get you by. You see that with all sorts of teams. They go running back by committee. These teams who pay these running backs big money, these running backs really aren't all that much better. Running back efficiency, it's going to come down to so many more things like offensive line play, play calling, scheming, and ultimately running the ball is still very inefficient as compared to passing the ball. The rules have changed to favor the passing game, and I think teams do need to start embracing this and throwing the ball more, airing it out, stop relying on the run, quit establishing the run. The goal of the offense is to move the ball efficiently and score points. Passing the ball does that better than running the ball, so we need to stop putting so much emphasis on establishing the run. But you have to run the ball to set up the pass. That's what everyone always says. How am I supposed to have good play action if I'm not running the ball? They'll just take defenders out of the box and they won't bite on the run. That's conventional wisdom. The analytics, again, they prove this wrong with hardcore data. The numbers do not support this theory at all. Ultimately, when you look at the metrics that measure if a quarterback's delivering the ball accurately, the idea that running to set up the pass is effective, it's not true. A quarterback is just as likely to throw a good pass after a good running play than they are to throw a good pass after a bad running play. So you're not really seeing a strong correlation between the run setting up the pass. It's more likely that just good plays follow up other good plays. Offense gets a little bit of momentum. They get the defense on their heels. And they keep them guessing. The running game doesn't really make the passing game much better. That's kind of a myth and an outdated idea. There just isn't a strong correlation between an effective run game and an effective play action effectiveness either. Teams that use play action, it just seems to work whether their run game is working or not. Play action is ultimately independent of the run game, which again goes against conventional wisdom, but that's really what the numbers have shown us. So this idea that we need to establish the run to set up our play action, that's not true. Play action just kind of works no matter what. What ultimately helps offenses run efficiently is deception, like play action, RPOs, motions, bootlegs, different blocking schemes, and it's going to disguise what the offense is ultimately trying to do. So just running the ball straight ahead at the defense, that's not going to set up your play action or help your offense run efficiently. It's the deception, it's the coaching. The run game is just kind of the run game off on its own little island. There isn't really much correlation between the run game setting up the pass game. The numbers support this, and I definitely buy into it. I believe all the analytics people when it comes to this stuff. The run game, it's inefficient. We need to start getting away from it. The rules favor the passing game. We need to embrace this. We need to start throwing the ball more in the NFL. But wait. What if you want to build a physical team because physical teams win? Well, that's not really what wins, because teams that are physical are usually judged by being physical because they run the ball a lot. The reason you run the ball a lot is because you're ahead in games. Rushing attempts are more of a function of being ahead in games than they are establishing the run and being committed to the run. Oh, but running the ball is supposed to help you control the clock. Well, clock control and time of possession is another one of those myths. It's not really a real thing in the NFL. It doesn't really help you win games. Just for an example, in 2011, only half the teams that were in top 10 in time of possession had a winning record, while there were 3 teams in the bottom 10 of time of possession, and they all had a winning record, including both of the teams that made it to the Super Bowl that year. The thing is, yeah, you might be controlling the clock, but ultimately you have to score points. You can score points in 30 seconds, or you can take a 10-minute drive and not score any points at all. So what it really comes down to is your points per drive. It doesn't matter how long you're holding the ball. If you're running the ball consistently, getting a few first downs, it's not going to matter if you don't cash in and score any points. Really what it is just wasted time. The thing about football is after you score, you have to kick the ball off and give it back to the other team. So ultimately, you're going to end up with the same number of possessions in a game unless you have like an onside kick or something like that. So it's what you do with the possessions you have, because there's only a finite amount of possessions you're going to get in a football game. You know, if you get 10, the other team's probably going to get 10 unless some team gets one extra one off of like an onside kick, or they just happen to have the ball first in the game and they also have the ball last in the game and score with like time expiring or something like that. So it's about making the most of your opportunities when you have the ball. It's not about having the ball for longer. It's about efficiency, the number of points you can score per drive. That's what's going to win you games. And on top of that, running the ball doesn't even have a correlation with time of possession. There's been studies done on this that just because you're running the ball does not mean you're going to have the ball for longer. What's going to help you keep the ball for longer is having more first downs and continuing your drive. The best way to get first downs is to throw the ball. It's more efficient. You're going to get more yards that way. That way you can hold onto the ball. So this idea that running the ball is important, establishing the run, controlling the clock, there's no correlation with that with the running game. Oh, but running the ball is supposed to help keep your defense off the field and let them be well rested. Well, that's not really true either. The defense helps the defense get rest by getting stops. There's no correlation between the amount of rest the defense is getting and defensive performance. There's not a correlation there. That might seem counterintuitive, but that's what the numbers show us, and that's what I'm going to buy. So this idea that running the ball and getting your defense more rest is going to help them perform better, that's just literally not true. There's no evidence to support that. So what the analytics teach us is that running the ball doesn't help you have any better time of possession, and that time of possession itself doesn't even really help you win games. Running the ball is more inefficient than passing the ball. Running the ball doesn't actually help set up your play action any better. Running the ball doesn't help your defense get any more rest, and a more well-rested defense doesn't actually perform any better. So what is running the ball really doing for you? Again, it's less efficient than passing it. If you want your offense to be less efficient, keep running the ball. See how it works out for you. I mean, look what happened to Seattle a couple years ago in the playoffs versus the Cowboys. They were down. They kept trying to run the ball. Ultimately, they were going home. One last point that I know people will like to bring up is that if you're running the ball, it gives your quarterback less opportunities to throw more interceptions, because obviously interceptions are going to increase as pass attempts increase. And yes, while there is a correlation between pass attempts and interceptions, obviously, interceptions aren't nearly the problem that they used to be, and I know I'll get killed for this, but interceptions are not nearly as bad as they once were. In 1960, when quarterbacks weren't that good, interceptions were a big problem, so it made more sense to just ground and pound it. Quarterbacks now are throwing less and less interceptions. Yes, you still have a few, like Jameis Winston throwing 30 last season, but that's more of an outlier. If we're talking on average, quarterbacks, they've gotten more accurate, they've gotten better with the ball, they protect the ball better, offenses are more designed to not turn the ball over, so interceptions are so infrequent anymore that it's actually at the point now where interceptions actually take away less value from a team's chances to win than do sacks. The analytics argue that a quarterback that is above average in taking sacks is more detrimental to his offense than a quarterback who throws above average interceptions. That's because the average amount of interceptions for a quarterback in today's NFL is way down from what it used to be, but there are still guys who take a lot of sacks, and as discussed earlier, sacks, they are a quarterback stat. So basically, if you have a quarterback that's average in interceptions and another quarterback that's average in sacks, you'd rather take the interceptions guy, and like I said, I know I will get killed for this. I know people don't want to agree with it, but that's what the analytics argue. An offense's efficiency and value and expected points added is more affected by a quarterback that is taking above average amount of sacks than a quarterback who is average to above average in interceptions, because sacks are so much more frequent than interceptions in today's NFL. A quarterback that throws a few interceptions, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, there are exceptions, but that's exactly what they are. They are exceptions. They are not the rule. So in the end, stop paying running backs top dollar. You're wasting your money. You can go get a guy off the street who can do a serviceable job. Of course, I'm exaggerating. It's still a difficult position. There's more that goes into just running the ball to be a running back. You have to be able to pass protect. You have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield in today's NFL. But the value of a good running back is just not that high. They're all kind of lumped together. The difference between a top-end guy and a bottom-end guy, it's not as big as you see in other positions like offensive linemen, quarterbacks, cornerbacks. And that is slightly being reflected that a lot more teams are going to running back by committee. A lot of teams aren't willing to pay running backs top dollar. Some teams still do. You see the Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott. I'm sure Derrick Henry will be paid very well. But these guys, they get broken down a lot. They have a lot of injuries. There's a lot of miles on them. And there's not a lot of value in having a top-end running back. They're just not worth the money because a running game, it's still inefficient. It's 2020, winning a Super Bowl or winning playoff games, it's not going to be done because you run the ball well. You're just going to run the ball well when you're ahead in the game. And the reason you're going to be ahead is because you pass the ball better than the other team. You're more efficient, you score more points, and you do that by throwing the ball. So a chance to wrap up my final thoughts. Stop using passer rating. It's outdated. Maybe it was good 10 years ago and we didn't have something better. But nowadays with these advanced metrics like completion percentage above expected, EPA per play, and QBR, there's better numbers to use. They're more accurate. They paint a better picture for how good a quarterback is. Stop using box score stats for the love of God. And stop trying to convince me that I need to establish the run in order to win football games. That is not true. It's quite the opposite. It's still inefficient. I don't have to run the ball to have a good play-action game. My play-action game will probably just be good no matter what because deception used in an offense is more effective than an efficient run game, which is still less efficient than an average pass game. So yes, I know that these opinions are very controversial, and that's why the analytics community takes a lot of heat for all the things that they say. But there's no doubt that they're definitely onto something. The math supports it. There's a lot of good reasons. Even though it goes against conventional wisdom and the logic that we've always used when evaluating football, this is more advanced, adds more context. It's definitely a better way to look at the game, and it gives us a new angle to help us better understand the game, and that's why I'm very pro analytics. So thank you for listening to my 3-part series, Playing Football on Spreadsheets, where we got a chance to break down some of the ongoing analytics debate in today's NFL. I had a lot of fun writing these episodes and recording them. I was definitely able to learn a lot of things about the game and things that I might not have expected because it went against my conventional wisdom. But it was definitely a great learning process, and I hope you guys were able to learn something too. So thanks again for listening to the Football Discussion Podcast. This is Colby Cummings.